10 o'clock came way too quick this morning for some reason. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Java with Jerry. Hope you're having a great Wednesday. It is Wednesday, November 28. You survived Thanksgiving. You're hurling toward Christmas, and we're spending some quality time together. So I thought we'd try a new theme today, and we talk about all the places in which we stick it to one another and we make our problem somebody else's, or we make the problem we're all sharing somebody else's responsibility, and that'll be the theme of our show. But as always, we will cover a little bit of news in the context of that theme, and then we'll have some commentary about it. We are coming to you, as always, live from the penthouse suite of Stadium Towers here in the Platinum Triangle in wonderful Anaheim, and we're glad you come and join us every week. And of course, those of you who are watching it after the fact, we're glad you tune in as well by signing up at Orange Slice to either catch the videos later or to get a podcast, so that when you're walking the dog or working out, or you just want to have it on in your ears while you're doing something in the backyard, you've got it. So there you go. Welcome as always. So let's talk a little bit about the news and some stories and how we stick it to one another, and then we'll do our millennial word of the day, which is our feature for today. All right. National news, I got a couple of national stories. One sort of an update on the president and the caravan and all that's going on in that, although it moves so quickly even I can't keep track of it all. And then an update on the Mueller investigation, which is another national story. So on the caravan front, the president is getting really totally frustrated because there's violence now down on the border, people trying to crash the border. And of course, our Border Patrol are doing what they need to do to try to repel those people back so that they can have some kind of orderly control over what's going on with crossings at the border. And so the president has now threatened to shut down the border permanently for a while and just say, look, we're leaving it shut for a long period of time until we can get control over this, until the new Mexican government can get inaugurated and installed and get its feet on the ground, and we can work out something that we can do with Mexico. And I will give credit to Mexico. They've been trying to do what they can about all these gate crashers that came crashing across their southern border. First, they offered them all a bunch of jobs and amnesty. The Mexican people have been coming out and trying to feed them and give them medicine and take care of them, even though in large part they've been ungrateful, critical of Mexico, tough to deal with, committing crime there, trashing the streets of Mexican cities, and being basically a handful. So in this last week, a bunch of them decided they're going to crash the gate, and of course our Border Patrol does what it always does, it repelled them back with tear gas, and of course now that's become a national calamity. You tear gas children, because they always make sure they bring a couple of knuckleheads to drag some kids, whether theirs, their own, or someone else's, in the line of fire so they can get a photo op for the left to go crazy over. A reminder to my friends on the left that are being hypocritical about this, President Obama used tear gas about once a month, sometimes a little more frequently when he needed to in order to repel crossings. So don't get too amped up about this. But clearly the president is saying to Mexico, look, I got to make this your problem because I don't want them across the border where they become my problem. So the president is sort of sticking it to Mexico, saying, you let them crash the southern border of your country, we're not letting them crash the southern border of mine, but I'll work with you and see what we can work out. So there's a case of the president making our problem, our collective problem, Mexico's problem. I'm not all that amped up about that because I think that's what the international bodies ought to do, is talk to one another and solve the problems, but that's what he's doing. In the meantime, on the other national story I wanted to talk about somebody getting it stuck to them. Let's talk about Mr. Jerome Corsi. So Jerome Corsi is an author who wrote a book about the deep state attacking Trump. And apparently he's been a friend for some time of Roger Stone. And so an article which was in, what was it, in Newsmax, I think, covered Corsi and his ongoing struggle with the Mueller investigation. Apparently when Corsi was being questioned, he offered to be as cooperative as he can, but it wasn't enough for Mueller's team. They wanted him to admit that he committed perjury and do a plea bargain, and he started talking to him about what it is that they want, and then when he realized they wanted him to admit to a lie and to a count of perjury in order to be able to save himself from whatever they were going to do to him, of course he went, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that, I didn't lie, I'm not going to plead to something I didn't do, which apparently has offended the Mueller team. So the article says that Corsi said he'd been offered a plea deal on one count of perjury. He told that to NBC senior news producer producer Anna Schechter, who tweeted Monday, quoting him, saying, "They want me to say I willfully," this is Corsi now speaking, "They want me to say I willfully lied. I'm not going to agree that I lied. I did not. I will not lie to save my life. I'd rather sit in prison and rot for as long as these thugs want me to." So there's a lot of love between him and the Mueller team, as you can see. Corsi also told CNN on Monday that he won't accept a plea deal, commenting during a telephone interview, quote, "They can put me in prison for the rest of my life. I'm not going to sign a lie." He also said he does not know what will happen if he refuses the deal. Nobody really does. Apparently, Corsi tried to confirm that he was offered a deal to plead to one count of perjury for being a possible intermediary between WikiLeaks and Roger Stone, who's a operative for Donald Trump back during the campaign. And he said he never met with WikiLeaks. He says, quote, "I never met WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. I've never spoken to him. I've never seen him, zero contact with him, and I had no intermediary who was in contact with him," of course he said. So you can see, and then he goes on to say, "Get Assange back here and he can prove it. It was Seth Rich, who was an operative for the Democratic Party and actually an employee of the DNC, I think, that did the stealing of the emails. It wasn't the Russians. He said it any number of times. I can prove it. I can support it." So, of course, he says the CIA helped manufacture evidence to show that Russia had hacked into the DNC server when, in fact, it was this fellow Seth Rich, who, as you know, turned up inexplicably dead as a product of a street robbery, which doesn't always happen to somebody who's got information. So there you go, Hillary and Bill. One more of your folks disappearing from the face of the earth. So Mueller's trying to stick it to Corsi so Corsi can stick it to Roger Stone so that they can mutually stick it to the president. And so the president is sticking it to Mexico and Mueller is trying to stick it to all these poor innocent people along the way, according to them. Now, in the midst of all of this, Congress has decided to go back and stick it to Mr. Comey, who they think may have lied about what his role was during the time of the investigation into Hillary Clinton. And they're trying to get that done, obviously, in the lame duck session of this Congress, because come January, we're going to swear in Nancy Pelosi as a new Speaker of the House, and then all the Trump investigations will open up, and there'll be no time for any Comey investigations. So former FBI Director James Comey, again, I think this is from Newsmax. Let me give attribution. Yes, a Newsmax article about the effort on Comey. Former FBI Director James Comey may have a point behind his demand to be interviewed in public when he testifies before the House Judiciary Committee if he's actually going to answer any questions at all. Ex-House Speaker Newt Gingrich said Monday it doesn't help him much if Comey says, quote, "I would like to appear in public," and then as soon as he appears in public, he says, "Well, I can't discuss this because it's classified." That just makes him look as if he's playing games, and so he's going to have to pick his poison. As a general rule, I think it's better, says Gingrich, to have the American people involved. They get to learn more, and they're capable then of rendering judgment. On Thanksgiving, Comey revealed that he'd been subpoenaed to speak before the House investigation into former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's use of private email systems. He said he would only speak if the questioning was done in public, and of course that's where this issue arises of, well, if it's done in public and then you claim everything is classified, what good would that be for you? Sunday, Representative Trey Gowdy, suggested that recording the whole proceeding would be the way to go, then releasing the video to the public after the fact. But Gingrich said there are people who will say that the video was tampered with. The remedy, says Gowdy, for leaks is not to have a public hearing where you're supposed to ask about 17 months worth of work in 5 minutes. I think the remedy is to videotape a deposition, videotape the transcribed interview. That way the public can see whether it was fair or not. Then they can judge the entirety of his answers. So there you go. Committee now sticking it to Comey, hoping that Comey will then stick it to Hillary. So isn't this fun? All right, let's switch gears off of the national story. Is state next? Yes. And talk a little bit about the state story and how the new governor about to be sworn in, Governor Newsom, may be sticking it to you. See the theme here? Isn't it? It's going just well. All right. So Newsom is going to come sworn in as the new governor with a whole pile of things he wants to get done. But among them, he wants to right his problem with income, because California, as you know, has a problem with income. So let's talk a little bit about what he has in mind. Beyond the fact that people are busy working on trying to figure out every flavor of tax known to man, Newsom is beginning to realize as he's getting closer to the throne now what we all know, which is when you rely, as California does, on the volatile income tax and capital gains, which it does, heavily taxing those who are producers in the state, several things happen. One, producers hightail it. They go, hey, look, this is too expensive a state to do business in. I get taxed to death. I get regulated to death. I can't grow my business here very well. If I do try to grow my business here, I can't hire any millennials because they can't afford a home. So maybe I ought to look at Idaho after all, or Texas or Florida or North Carolina or any number of places that they've been fleeing to. Fleeing, you say? I say fleeing. Since 2008, in the last 10 years, we've bled, are you ready for this? 1,700 companies. 1,700 companies. Some states don't have 1,700 companies. We're bleeding them like crazy. So Newsom says, look, I got to do something about this imbalance. And so his notion is to raise an idea that was once Mr. Hertzberg's, and before Mr. Hertzberg, it was Mr. Parsky's. Parsky was a guy who put together a commission when Schwarzenegger said he had to do something to balance out the income that the state was getting from taxes. And their notion was to start taxing services, including professional services. So now you would pay tax on the services you receive from your accountant, your lawyer, your doctors, etc. Those professional services are generally not taxed. They'd like to tax those. That doesn't mean necessarily they want to give you back any of your income tax. They might like to tax your income tax and tax those because they're already overly taxing your gas. So let's tax your gas and tax your services and tax your income. Why don't we tax you when you breathe? And so that's the notion of what Newsom wants to do. He wants to raise this issue again with a 2/3 majority in his legislature now that can do whatever they want to do to raise taxes with nary a Republican being involved. In fact, the Republicans can go take macrame classes and they can learn how to do martial arts or something because during the day they're not going to be very useful around the Capitol. Newsom and his legislature may just decide to do an income tax cut, says Newsom, in order to get these new taxes on services and other opportunities. And of course, the other thing that they're doing is they're talking about doing a split roll on the 2020 ballot, which means they will now raise taxes on commercial properties more frequently than they do on homes and exempt that commercial property from the protections of Prop 13, which is a constitutional protection. So they have to go to the ballot and ask you peeps to do that. And so they're looking for that opportunity to raise taxes on property. And what do you think that will do in the state of California? Well, that story, by the way, came from, where did that come from? CalWatch. Here's another one from the same source. Here's what happens when you start sticking it to the taxpayer. What you see happening in California since the election. You know, because we've covered it so very heavily in the last month, that in the last election, the Democrats swept California. Of the 7 congressional seats they wanted to flip, they flipped all 7 from red to blue. They swept the legislature to the point where there are only 9 Republican senators out of 40 in the upper chamber of the California legislature, and only 19 assemblymen out of 80 in the lower chamber. That's why I said they basically can go pay tiddlywinks. So what did Californians do in response to that? It didn't take them long. According to this article in CalWatch, Southern California homeowners rushed to list their house for sale. Listings are up 42% to a 4-year high. People are bailing, right? They're going, okay, I'm putting my house up for sale while there's still people that want to buy it, and I'm getting out of Dodge. Give you some local stats. They say in the article, we're about to feel the effects of Sacramento's taxes, the low quality of our schools, the high cost of living here, including the fact that our young people can't buy a home, and the taxes that are about to bury us. In 2020, they want to put a ballot measure on that could kill hundreds of thousands of California jobs by splitting the roll on commercial properties, which will have a terrible impact on jobs. And of course, all your local agencies are also taxing the living death out of you and raising your minimum wages and doing all the other things that are inhospitable to you. And so people started to bail. They've started putting houses on the market. Such a glut of housing on the market that the market can't absorb them fast enough. So the length of time from listing to sale is being exaggerated and getting longer because they've got a glut of these new listings, up 42% according to the stats here. In LA County, 44 more days to go from sale to close, 105 days supply already on the market. In Orange County, 61 more days for sale, 122 days worth of supply. Supply up in Orange County 53%. So the people in Orange County, they voted blue and then they listed the house, right? In Riverside County, 42 more days, 134 days of supply. In San Bernardino County, 45 more days, 117 days more of supply. So if you're thinking of dodging, get in line behind all your neighbors who are already thinking of dodging. You're going to have to wait for their house to sell before yours. Well, not necessarily. It doesn't exactly work like that. If your house is more attractive than theirs, then bona fortuna to you. Anyway, the supply is up by huge percentages and the market is slowing. So there you go. That's Southern California taxpayers sticking it to the man. They're looking at Newsom and all these new Congress people and they're saying, oh yeah, well, you want to raise my taxes? Guess what? I'm heading out to parts east. That's where everybody goes because we're so far west. All right. While all of that is happening on the local front, we're sticking it to one another as well. So let me tell you about a story that we haven't really covered that much about. We did a little bit when we talked about homelessness, and so I'll give you a little context for this before I tell you what the story is. But this was a pretty significant event and really was sort of a protection of local control by judges for a change. Excuse me while I take a sip of Java. Hope you're doing the same as we meet each Wednesday morning. So, backdrop. You all know that we've been suffering from an enormous amount of homelessness. Part of that, I think, has been exacerbated in California by the downturn in the market during the Obama years when the economy slumped and got so bad. A lot of people lost jobs. Some of it is just because we've had such an influx of people here that there isn't a sufficient amount of housing. Housing prices then went up from the pressures of the marketplace. That caused some people who are really close at the margin and were barely struggling as it was to hang on to a roof over their house to have real economic problems. And the combination of all of that, plus the fact that we opened the doors on all our prisons and emptied them because they were overcrowded because of the influx of poverty and crime and not enough beds in the prisons and the feds leaning on the state, that the state released a bunch of people out into the street and they intermingled with people who have been there for decades because we turned our back on people who needed help years ago, way back into the Reagan administration. I know it was a kindly thought on the part of conservatives that the community would pick up the slack if the state didn't, but what you ended up with was a bunch of people out on the street who are suffering from mental illness, suffering from drug addiction, suffering from alcoholism, getting no treatment anywhere, getting no care, and taking up residence under our freeway overpasses and along our railroad lines and the rest. Well, among all those people, obviously, are drug addicted, and the drug addicted use needles, and because they're, whacked out half the time, they don't think about using clean needles every time, nor do they necessarily have clean needles all the time. And on top of that, being neighborly to the other addicts around them, they share needles, right? And so you get hepatitis, you get all kinds of diseases. So a group of people who thought, we got a great plan for keeping people healthy among the drug population, not getting them care, mind you. We're not going to try to interdict the issue. We're not going to get to the source of the problem. We're just going to make it easier for them to use. Decided, how about a needle exchange program? You bring me one dirty needle, I'll give you 20 clean ones. And so the Orange County Needle Exchange Program started its efforts out in the community. The net impact of that on cities was that the addicts were then using the needles, and because they were so plentiful and available to them, they would just toss them. They were all over the streets. I think tons of needles were collected on the Orange County riverbed when they cleared that finally earlier this year. And so this Orange County Needle Exchange Program wanted to operate throughout the county. The county and some of the cities in the county, particularly those suffering the most with homelessness, Anaheim, Orange, Santa Ana, resisted, and the county itself resisted, and it ended up in a lawsuit that for some reason, probably because of change of venue, ended up in San Diego. So here's the article. This one comes from, so you can always go back and read directly from the source, the Orange County Register, an article written by, let me give a byline credit to Alicia Robinson, who wrote this in-depth article. I'm only quoting snatches and bits of it, but go read her work. In a blow to a nonprofit group that hoped to run a needle exchange program in Orange County cities, a judge on Tuesday, November 27th, barred the program from operating at least until next year. Until the new year, he doesn't say when. In a ruling, San Diego Superior Court Judge Joel Wolfill, I hope I said that right, Judge, agreed with concerns raised by Orange County officials in the cities of Anaheim, Costa Mesa, and Orange. Sorry, I misquoted. Santa Ana was also affected but did not join the lawsuit. That the potential for used syringes to litter the community and stick people was too great. The other city needle exchange organizers wanted to serve Santa Ana as well, but as I said, they opposed the program but did not join the suit. Wolfill granted a preliminary injunction which blocks the needle program until the trial is held sometime in early 2019, a date not yet set by the judge. Mahan Nalem, a member of the Orange County Needle Exchange Program, hope I didn't butcher your name, Mahan, a member of their steering committee, said the organizers were, quote, incredibly disappointed, unquote, with the ruling and will continue to explore options on how to serve those who need the program. The group's volunteer planned to meet Tuesday afternoon, that was yesterday, to consider their next steps. For about 2 years, the organizers operated a syringe exchange weekly at the Santa Ana Civic Center, which was a huge homeless encampment that I referred to earlier, that was intended to help reduce the transmission of HIV, hepatitis C, and other illnesses that can spread when injection drug users share needles. The notion is noble, don't get me wrong. I mean, what they're trying to do is prevent a health crisis, but it comes with the downside. They also offered information about drug treatment and access to drugs that can counteract opioid overdoses, so they were trying to be as holistic as they could as volunteers. But the exchange program was halted in January when Santa Ana officials denied a permit to continue, citing concerns about syringes found in public places that in some cases had pricked workers. In fact, in some places, including along the freeways where you see Caltrans trying to clean up needle use along the freeways, you see them in hazmat suits as they try to pick these things up and clean them up because they're so dangerously drug addicted and sick, the people that use them, that they spread their illness to others. So Santa Ana officials denied the permit, citing concerns about these syringes. Orange County said no further program could be run, and the closest ones are in LA and San Diego. So the California Department of Health says those were the only places that there were programs as it was. Judge Wolfill's ruling praised the Orange County Needle Program and said it had a, quote, noble goal, unquote, and that, quote, it had selfless devotion, unquote, of its volunteers, but he also agreed with city and county officials that concerns regarding the needle exchange program, including the adequate resources to prevent or clean up needle litter, citing more than 250,000 syringes that were unaccounted for in the Civic Center operation. So there's 250,000 syringes just in the Civic Center, and as I said, they picked up tons of these, hundreds of thousands as well, I think, out of the riverbed. Quote, the seriousness of the harm outweighs the social utility of the program, said the judge. Orange City Councilman Mark Murphy called the program, quote, flawed. I don't believe it's something that has much benefit in its current form, he said, adding that the organizers should offer syringes at a medical facility if they want to continue distribution. The notion there, I think, that Mayor Pro Tem Murphy is citing is that at least if you're at a medical facility, they've got hazmat capable containers where they can put the used syringes so that they can be picked up by hazmat people who use the right procedures to keep the community safe. Orange County Supervisor Andrew Doe, who's supervisor sort of for the western side of the county, including Santa Ana, said the decision will protect public health until the program organizers can come up with a more fully developed plan. So they're not saying no forever to Orange County Needle Exchange Program. They're just saying you got to get your plan more fleshed out in terms of what you do with these used needles. Although injection drug users may face disease risks when they lack clean needles, Doe said he's more concerned about the risk of the discarded syringes that they pose to the public, because the public did not choose, he said, to take those risks when walking down the street in the morning or opening a book in a public library. The reason Supervisor Doe raises opening a book in the public library is that among the other things that the homeless do is they seek shelter, right? Shelter from high heat, shelter from rain, shelter from cold. They do it in public libraries, which most people don't go to during the day because kids are in school and kids are the heavy users of libraries, and instead the drug addicted or the homeless go to the libraries and they use it for shelter, and what they do is they leave their litter everywhere, and so they were leaving needles in their books. So they'd read a book, toss a needle in there, some kid would open it. You can see the nightmare. So there's a story where a judge, oh man, I'm really getting down there in time, where I've been so engaged in this whole theme of sticking it to you, where a judge is sticking it to the Orange County Needle Exchange Program, and the Orange County Needle Exchange Program is trying to stick it to disease so that they can help the homeless who unfortunately have spent a lifetime sticking it to themselves with their drug addiction. Look, peeps, we got to get a lot smarter about how we solve all these programs. We got to quit trying to do it in a less than holistic way. We got to do something about mental health care in this state. That's a state issue, state. That's not a county or local issue. That's a state issue, doing something about the mental health of our homeless. We've got to do something about the drug addicted. State, county, because you deliver health care services. That's a state, county issue, more than just the occasional health care for people who are addicted. We need some programs for them to get them off of the addiction and try to help as many as we can. And then state, counties, cities, and private sector, you got to do something about housing. It's out of control. So people are fleeing. That's going to open up some housing, but that's not making housing any the more cheap for people who are looking for it in California. So there you go. Everybody's been sticking it to somebody in our stories for the day. So it's time for my millennial word, because I have used up all my time, my producers tell me. So what word did we pick? Well, the brilliant millennials that I have do research found a word that sort of talks about what's going on. The president was sticking it to Mexico and saying to Mexico, you need to solve this problem. Mexico saying, this is not in my lane, it's not my problem. The investigators on the Russian collusion story sticking it to all these poor people along the way, getting them to try to plead to something they didn't lie about so they could get to the president. The Republicans in the lame duck session trying to stick it to Comey so they can stick it to Hillary. The state trying to stick it to taxpayers. The homeowners trying to stick it to the marketplace and dodge the taxes. And the Needle Exchange Program, where everybody's sticking it to somebody. So I asked them, find me a word, metaphorically speaking, where people are sticking it to each other. Well, millennials don't talk like that. So they found me the closest thing they could, which is swerve. And what does swerve mean? When you're not welcome here, get lost, leave us alone, get out of my lane. Swerve, dude. So that's what everybody's trying to do. They're trying to swerve away from the problem and leave it to somebody else, or they're telling somebody else, it's your problem, so swerve out of my lane. So there's your millennial word, boomers, swerve. I hope you don't swerve too far from your goals this week, that you have a good one. We will see you next week. It will be December next week. It will be December. I hope you're doing well with your Christmas planning, and we'll see you next Wednesday on Java with Jerry, where we never swerve from the issues.